Thank you, listeners, for joining us. Today's Elko Live features an update from Elko County School Superintendent C.J. Anderson. We're going to take this entire half an hour and get up to speed on a recent budget workshop, a Board of Trustees meeting on Tuesday, all the latest updated information that's available, including where do we go from here when it comes to Elko County School District budget woes. Welcome, CJ. Thanks for being on the program and being available to talk about this really tough subject.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Lori, as always, for the opportunity and not only the opportunity to talk with you about this, but also the opportunity to relay factual information about what has happened, is happening, and we anticipate will happen.
So one thing we know for sure is that various aspects of the proposed budget have brought out people in very passionate ways, concerned about education, concerned about serving students, people concerned about their careers, for example. So the most recent budget workshop that was held on Tuesday in advance of the regular school board meeting did give us kind of an overview of where we are. I think we can start with the latest news in that the school district was able to find some $4.4 million in expenses to cut within just in-house.
Yeah. So just to kind of back up a little bit, you mentioned the budget workshop. Highly encourage anyone who may feel confused about how school district funding and budgets work. If you're listening to this, you probably fall in that category of people who don't totally understand how those things work. It's a very complicated scenario. Some people who maybe have a lot of experience already, I can think of a few people in our community who have a lot of experience in government finance. A lot of it might be old news to you, but for most people, yeah, I think you'll be surprised at some of the things that you see. So just like where you would normally find our board meeting agendas, that was posted on our board docs. And there's an excellent presentation on that board workshop agenda that was presented by Cassie Stalkey, who's our CFO, and it was just a great general overview of how that financing works. A lot of times when we're having these conversations, people like to speak in terms. You speak in terms of what you know and you understand, right? So people speak in terms of the budget at their house, or they speak in terms of their checking account, or they speak in terms of their small business. And while there is some transferability to how your home budget or your small business budget works, there is probably less in common than there is in common when it comes to a government budget or a school district budget.
There are probably hundreds of budgets within that budget, literally. So.
Yeah. So and that's what's so great about this conversation and this update that presentation that Cassie presented was it goes through how there are these buckets and these different accounts and these funds within accounts and what things are restricted. And restricted isn't like we don't impose restrictions on ourselves on how money can be used, not in this term of the use of the word restriction, but there are state restrictions on different pots of money. And so it's confusing for someone to see you have a big budget deficit, but you have $13 million or just as a number sitting in your capital improvement plan. Well, why don't you go fix that? Well, that's because that is against the law to do that. There's that money has to be used for a specific purpose. The same would go for special education funding. That has to be used for a specific purpose.
You can't use it for bus drivers.
I cannot use that for bus drivers. I cannot use that to pay a bill for a salary of someone who's not a special or to take care of a boiler issue. Yeah, so that money is restricted for this specific purpose. And so I could go on and on with examples, but the presentation does a great job of laying out exactly how that works, and it does a good job too of explaining why the way the people-centered funding plan is structured is impacting us not just as a rural school, but as a rural school district, but as a school district that is experiencing enrollment decline, which other school districts are to a certain extent. We're experiencing it a little more drastically than others are. But in a system that is tied directly to enrollment numbers, as that enrollment decreases throughout the year, trying to speak in terms of what people understand. Like, you make a budget, but think about what if 4 times a year your job said, we're actually going to pay you less now, and then 3 months later, we're actually going to pay you less now, right? You would have to make budget adjustments, and it would be difficult to do that every time your job said that. And to continue with that metaphor, we've been told over the last 16 quarters, essentially, that we're giving you less money now.
And you've been talking about that, CJ, in the community, on this program, government affairs, everywhere that you had an audience. So it's not as though this just, surprise.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. There's. I don't want to get too much. I'm really more interested in moving forward, and that I'm not saying that as a matter of convenience. I just don't think the revisionist history is very helpful. But there have been conversations that, to be polite, are false. And there's a narrative that nothing has been done since we've started to know about these enrollment decreases. Things have been done, and that's why we have only got to this problem now. If we'd done nothing 4 years ago, we'd have been at this problem 2 or 3 years ago. But things have changed over time. It's just that at a certain point, it catches up to you, and you can't outrun it anymore. And so that's kind of why we are where we are now. It's not an excuse. It's an explanation of how we've gotten to where we are.
But it's not mismanagement. I guess that's the other thing, as you said. It's easy for people to be critical. We're just trying to provide some facts. And also on this program today, CJ, I think it's important that we know as a community where we're going from here, what we can do to maybe influence some change. We know that the core drivers of this deficit include the reduction in what you described as the pupil-centered funding plan. That's the money we get from the state. The reality of declining enrollment. We've had an 11% drop since 2019, 2020. And there are some things that have already been done. There is a hiring freeze, for example. But I think this latest proposal, the proposition of consolidating Flagview into all the 6th graders in the school district, that one's generating a lot of talk. Is that something you would want to address?
Yeah, I'd be happy to address that. I'm going to go backwards again, though, because we can talk about that. But you mentioned about things that had been done, and you brought up the $4.4 million. There's been talk about what is being done or what has been done, and so basically, as soon as we had our audit come back and we found out that the situation was even a little more dire than we had anticipated. We immediately started to take actions and think about things that we could do right away before we got to this February meeting. And so that $4.4 million figure that you said represents a bunch of immediate actions that we started to take. I want to point out some of those things and what's kind of encompassed within that $4.4 million figure, which I always... In anything having to do with our district budget, it's always tough to give hard and fast figures because not everything is as simple as it sounds. But just some general numbers in certain cases, some more specific than others. So among that $4.4 million represents a proposal to move our current year's purchase of textbooks, which has already happened, to move that over to a different fund. And in this case, that would be the Capital Improvement Fund. There were questions around whether that's even allowed or not. It is. It's something that is perfectly allowable within law to do that. But that is something that we haven't just unilaterally made a decision to do, because decisions were made about a capital improvement plan by our own internal capital improvement committee, by the county oversight panel that works with us on capital improvement, and by our board. And so to make, if it was just a quick, simple change to something, maybe don't have to run it through all of those measures. But when we're talking about a transfer of $2 million, which would impact our capital improvement budget now, we want to make sure to include all those same stakeholders in that decision. And so that has yet to be approved. I'm hopeful that it will be. But that was one thing. We anticipate around $800,000 of insurance savings from adjustments we've made to our self-insurance fund this year. We were able to relocate certain pre-K or early childhood salaries and over to some weighted funds that we have. And if you don't know what a weighted fund is, it's in that budget workshop explanation. We have general fund maintenance that we've moved over to another fund that can be used for maintenance called the Building and Sites Fund. We instituted a non-essential travel freeze at the beginning of this calendar year. We're trying to estimate some savings on PERS for certain substitutes. And then we also have cut 5 different positions from central office throughout the course of this year. One of the comments that I've heard a lot is, things should be happening at the top before anything happens at schools. However, I don't think enough attention is being brought to the fact that 5 positions have already been cut from central office. Something that I've said along all of this is we've lost about 10, you cited a second ago, we've lost about 10 to 11% of enrollment over the course of those years. I've said the logical thing is to make sure that you have also proportional decreases in staff as you lose enrollment, since money is directly tied to enrollment. And not coincidentally, 5 positions at central office represents around 8% of our central office staffing, and other positions are also still being reviewed, but those were ones that we could identify very quickly to take care of. And so we're not, I'll say I am not going after one level or another. We are trying to equitably have these cuts or these adjustments, however you want to look at it, take place across the board, because no one area can be expected to sustain the type of adjustments that are having to be made to have the district be whole. It's a whole district issue, and all elements of the district are going to end up being impacted by these adjustments.
And that's right, CJ. I mean, each school is not a silo. I mean, this is all interconnected. Central office administers these programs, accounts for the money, supports all of the individual school districts, which are as unique as the one-room schools that we have in places like Independence Valley, clear to West Wendover, Jackpot High School, Spring Creek, Elko. I mean, the list is on and on. This is an extremely diverse. Can you imagine just abandoning everyone and saying, well, we're going to close up shop here and you guys can just fend for yourselves? I mean,
it's not a reasonable, even if you just said, well, we're going to just clean sweep central office. Number one, that actually wouldn't
save much money.
That wouldn't save you the money you're
right,
thinking it would.
Right.
It would save a portion of this deficit that we're talking about and the money we're trying to save. And then you would be leaving schools with pretty important things to do, like make the budget, do all the reporting that the state requires, have grants that you apply for and manage.
Manage transportation systems.
All of transportation, all of
food
maintenance
service.
And food.
Yeah.
I mean, so many different things that schools rely on from a central office standpoint. And so when you gut, that's why you can't just gut one area, because if you do that, you're now leaving schools without the supports that they need. And so, and there's, while there are people who are emotionally charged about the topic and might think of that as a great solution, it would not be a great solution.
So CJ, what does happen next? What can we anticipate? Again, we kind of rolled in the conversation about Flagview. That seems to be the big issue right now, with folks worried about a consolidation there.
Yeah. So among the many things that were proposed as suggestions to reach that additional 11 or so million that we need to get to zero, there were multiple suggestions, and one of those was Flagview. And so what you asked me to kind of elaborate on that a little bit. What we see across our district right now, and we're going to focus on Elko, the city of Elko, because unfortunately a lot of these things have to happen in the city of Elko. When you look at our outlying areas, they are ecosystems within themselves.
They're place-bound, right?
Yeah, there is no shuffling kids from one place to another. Like there's one at a combined schools, just say Wells, for example. You have one school where all the kids within all that attendance boundary goes, and there's no additional schools to kind of draw from or consolidate to. There are still things that can be done position-wise at those schools if the enrollment dictates that things should be done position-wise. But in the case of Elko, where because of decreased enrollments over the last 3 to 4 years, you have You have elementaries that were previously more full of students than they are now, and the same would go for Flagview. They have maintained a little more of a stasis than the elementary schools have, but what you have now are elementary schools that are not at their programmatic capacity, and you have another school that's also not at programmatic capacity. And so in terms of, one of the budget committee recommendations, and something that's very normal to be done, we've seen it in Douglas, we're seeing it in Washoe, and we're seeing it in places all over the country. A very normal thing to be done is to look at, is there consolidation to be done? And by consolidation, I mean, do you meld schools together because you now have more rooms than needed, and for the moment. And so what we're trying to avoid, and are trying to avoid still, is we certainly don't want to close any schools. We're not trying to shut down an entire school community.
Because that represents a neighborhood.
Yes. Correct. And but unfortunately, whether it's consolidating or closing, it's going to feel like that regardless. And so in an effort to do two things, to number one, not close a school entirely, and then also in an effort to try to find a way to do a consolidation that impacts as few people as possible, or inconveniences as few people as possible. This was, in my estimation, the kind of best case scenario here. Of course, it's a terrible scenario. Never have I, about any of these things have I said, yeah, this is great. This is a great thing for us to do.
And we should back up just a tiny bit so that folks know Elko City's Flagview is a 5th and 6th grade campus. 5th and 6th graders from throughout the city of Elko attend this one campus. So what the proposal is that 5th graders would stay at their elementary schools, and then the entire campus would be for 6th graders for now. That's part of the phase of the consolidation. I didn't mean to interrupt you, CJ, but
no, you're great. That's good information.
We kind of assume, right?
Sometimes you just
right.
You take for granted what people know. So that's correct. And also to give a little historical background, prior to Flagview's implementation, about, I think the number I heard yesterday was 18 or 19 years ago, the reality was all of your students K through 6 were at elementary schools previously, right?
They were.
So there was this idea, and it was so good to have Trustee Dastrup speak to this, because she is a long-serving board member and wasn't on the board when that happened, but was on the board not too long after that. And she kind of gave a reminder that was the creation of a 5th, 6th grade campus was meant to be a temporary solution to an overcrowding problem, right? And so, again, not to reduce what the effort that people put in there, but at a time when you were overcrowded, if that was a solution to an overcrowding problem, and now we have the opposite problem. We have a lack of pupil problem. So if it was a reasonable solution for the inverse of the problem, then the inverse of that action should also seem like a reasonable solution.
And CJ, to further that, we were supposed to have a second elementary school on the south side. And that just never came to fruition. That was part of this
There was supposed to be a construction of another elementary school, right?
Yes.
And that never happened. So, the district, for whatever reason at that time, they chose that action. I have no qualitative comment on whether it was a good or a bad decision. I wasn't around. That's that point, and now we're at a point where we are looking for areas to consolidate. And so as that kind of expanded at that time due to those numbers, we now have to retract a little bit due to our numbers. And so the idea is, people have talked about moving kids back, like no children in this proposal would be moving back to anywhere. What we're talking about is, because hopefully people don't think we're talking about doing this between now and the end of the school year, because that's not at all what the proposal is either. The proposal is that, next year, the kids who are at their current elementary school would stay at their current elementary school with the staff they know, with the teachers they know, with the support systems that know them, with a lot of familiarity. It would just be a different plan than what they were, had in mind for the next year. The kids who are currently 5th graders will move to sixth grade and stay at the school that they're currently at as well, just like they were always planning to before. And the sixth graders that are at Flagview now will also do what they were planning to before and go to Adobe and move on to seventh grade. So nobody would be being moved back anywhere. And with those changes, what that creates is openings for the teachers who are at Flagview who teach fifth grade to now fill that role as a fifth grade teacher, but just at another facility. And I recognize that there's a lot of discomfort that comes with moving classrooms. I'm a person who actually loves change, and it wouldn't bother me all that much. But that's not everyone. Some people like their safety, they like their familiarity, and I can see why that's uncomfortable. But just as when Flagview was created, people left their classrooms at that point to go to where the students needed to be. Mm-hmm. And at this point, the students are going back to the elementary schools. That's the proposal anyway, to be where the students need to be. And in my estimation and in my proposal, right? People can have different opinions, and I totally respect that. From a standpoint of trying to find savings without negatively impacting many schools, this felt like a logical decision.
How much would this save, CJ?
So that number is going to be tough to again, I hate giving hard and fast numbers because of reduction. So a lot of positions at schools are, again, money is tied to enrollment. So when you have a school that has a certain number of students, certain numbers of positions get assigned to that. So kind of the natural order of reducing the number of students at a campus would also be to reduce certain numbers of positions. And so I've thrown out the number of about $500,000 would be saved by making this adjustment, which again has no kids now going somewhere different than they would have been next year, or than they currently are or would have been going to next year, right? Those kids will still be at a school they know, or what they were planning on doing next year. What ends up happening is, because of that reduction, we won't need, and I'm uncomfortable talking about which positions specifically, because these aren't positions, these are people that I know. I know the names of all of these people. I know their faces, and we've had individual conversations. And so out of respect for them, I'm not going to talk about which position specifically, but when you start to tally up the amount of money that's wrapped up in those salaries of people who work in those positions that would no longer be required
at that campus,
mm-hmm. then those become savings, because those positions also wouldn't move to those other elementary schools, because those elementary schools are only increasing by a portion of those 300 or so students. So that gets distributed not evenly, but in smaller amounts over 4 campuses. And those positions that were required at a campus of 600, 700 kids are no longer required at a campus of 300 kids. And the elementaries only increased to a certain extent where it also doesn't require those positions there, because they currently have the infrastructure they need.
And so the reality is that by, we're talking 26-27 school year, Flagview could be mothballed, right? It would be an empty campus, CJ?
I am not comfortable saying that.
Okay, because the school board has to vote on this.
Yeah, so I want to be clear about something. So for maybe you may have misspoken with the year number. 26-27 that's in 6 months. That would be a 6th grade school for next year.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
You're okay. So our current 5th graders would still be in 6th grade at Flagview. That's the proposal.
Yes, through a full other year.
Well, I wouldn't even say that. They would be there.
Yes.
I don't have a plan to close Flagview. That is a terribly presumptuous and awful rumor that is spreading around.
Well, I'm glad I asked the question because...
Yeah. And I'm not saying you're the...
Oh, no, I know what you're
doing
saying,
that rumor,
though.
but that is the sentiment. People have chosen to jump to the conclusion that because 5th grade is being reduced this year, that means 6th grade is going to be reduced the next year. And that is not the
So you still need some staff at 6th grade. You just don't need 5th grade staff at...
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's absolutely right. Now, I also don't want to leave out the possibility that could happen, because the reality is, if enrollment continues to decline, we will have to continue to make adjustments. And so we're constantly thinking of ways we can help address this and still make sure that our schools right-sized for what is going on in our enrollment right now.
Because I know that was another question at school board, teachers and parents concerned about class sizes, obviously.
Yeah, and anyone who's been an educator, and I say that because that was me. I was a teacher, and I've been in classrooms that had amazing class sizes, and I was also a teacher who had a class of 37 sixth graders, and 37 sixth graders, and not enough desks in the room, and kids were sitting on a counter in the back of the room. I've been in that seat before, and I don't say that to say, well, I did it, you can do it too, because I have no intention of getting us to that number. That's an absurd number for someone to have. And I don't know what led to me having that many students when I was in that classroom. I'm sure there were hard decisions around that too. I taught the kids that were in front of me because that's what you do. And so that situation is to be avoided at all costs. But right now we are operating under class sizes that are very favorable, and unfortunately, our budget and the amount of money we get does not support us having those class sizes that we have now.
So how do we, if at all, as a community, and I just say as a community, whether you're a parent or not, whether you have students in school, this has to do with the entire society and the future of Elko. How do we, if not reverse this, how are we going to impact this positively? CJ, what do we do?
Yeah, so positively, the more, obviously, since enrollment or funding is tied to enrollment, the more students we have enrolled in our schools, the more funding that will come in, and the fewer of these types of decisions we have to make, and the more positions we can offer as we have, and class sizes can get smaller as you have more positions. But really, for me, while we're here making these adjustments, the reality is, these won't be temporary adjustments if nothing changes at the state level and with the state formula and with our enrollment. Like this is our reality as long as this is the reality of the state funding formula. Or if more money is infused into that state funding formula, like that was 3+ years ago or 3-ish years ago when Governor Lombardo infused $2 billion into the funding plan, that allowed for certain things to happen. We were able to maintain positions. We were able to give raises, which is what they were, what that money was primarily intended for. And we were able to help offset some of the challenges that we were experiencing up to that point already. But unless there's a change made in the funding formula, and unless we have more students in our schools, I'm an optimist by nature, but I'm also being realistic. Like, this doesn't get better unless the funding gets better.
So, and I'm not asking you at all to be political. We have 7 of 17 school districts on a watch list. This is not an Elko County problem. It's a Nevada problem. And, why hasn't the governor stepped in? What do you know about this? You're part of the cohort of the 17 school districts.
Yeah, so, the governor has done a lot of wonderful things for education. I just referenced the $2 billion infusion. The governor was essential in passing, the bill that's funding the new Owyhee school. He was a staunch advocate of AB 519, which not only did that for the Owyhee school, but also created a capital improvement funding mechanism that allowed us to benefit when our community decided not to fund capital improvement projects in our district anymore. Like, he has done a lot of wonderful things for education, and I've had enough conversations with the Governor Lombardo to know that he cares about our schools and cares about education and the success of education in our state. But what needs to happen is there have to be adjustments to the funding formula, and I can't say why they haven't happened yet. I can only imagine that if it is this difficult for 7 out of 17, and I only anticipate that number is going to climb, if it's that difficult for school districts to make things work within the financial parameters that school districts have right now, I have to imagine a state budget is exponentially more complicated to manage. It's got to be so hard. I am wholly uncomfortable speaking to why he hasn't done more. I know that there's a wonderful commission. It's called the State Commission on School Funding. In fact, our CFO, Cassie Stalkey, is a member of that commission, and that commission spends every between every legislative session, each biennium, they review what's going on. That like this funding formula shouldn't just be what it is and then no adjustments ever made to it. That doesn't make sense, because if it did, that would imply it's a perfect plan, and we know it's not perfect. We're seeing right now that it's not perfect, and this plan is only in its 5th or 6th year of existence. So adjustments have to be made to it, and that Commission on School Funding creates recommendations for the governor, for the state assembly, for the state senate to signal, hey, this isn't working. In this regard, this is causing this type of strife here. This is causing this strain on this part of the funding plan. And in order to make it better, you're going to need to, we're recommending you do the following things to it. And those recommendations are always made. They are not always followed. And so when those recommendations that are made based off of lots of research and lots of data and are presented before legislators, and they choose to not do anything with those at that time, what that means is, well, you can expect the same results that we're getting. And what those results are is school districts slowly getting to a point where we're at and where a bunch of other districts are at right now.
CJ Anderson is our school superintendent. We're getting near the end of our conversation again, but we just wanted to remind listeners where we are with the school budget. I did want to just quickly mention in 2021, there was this landmark legislation creating the new excise tax on gold and silver mining to fund education. Folks got kind of excited about that. It was AB 495 until we realized in rural Nevada that it essentially carved out. It changed how mining tax revenue works in Nevada. Before this, the portion of the net proceeds of minerals, the mining tax, stayed directly in Elko County, supporting the school district. After AB 495, the money is pooled at the state level into the state education fund. So we bear the brunt of supporting the families and all of those associated with the mining industry, which we love doing. But the reality is we don't have the resources to support the education that's required.
Yeah, that represented to the tune of annually millions and millions of dollars that we no longer receive directly. We get our, as the state would say, equitable portion of that money. But what that means is if we represent 4% of the state as far as enrollment goes, then that means we're getting 4% of the money that comes from the mining tax. When and you said it beautifully before, when we know that a lot more of that is coming out of here but not staying here. So yeah, that's an element, and it's hard. All of this is hard, and that's been the challenge with this. Is there have been attempts to kind of simplify what led to this point and what to do to correct this, and all of it is anything but simple. It's very complicated, which is why it's important to work together, and it's important why it's important to try to be creative and to continue to work on these, because we're going to continually have to adjust to this.
Mm-hmm. And we need to be supportive, obviously. And so I'm guessing, CJ, you'll be back, and we'll keep having these conversations, taking us from, one school board meeting to the next. In the meantime, people can avail themselves of all this information and much more. You can dive as deep as you want to dive. You can find it at the school district website, right, CJ? Yeah,
of course. All of this information is 100% there. It's we have a wonderful portion of our website that's dedicated to this issue, to our budget and transparency, and all of our updates are there. Lots of information at a statewide level. Something that was mentioned by our board president at our meeting on Tuesday is the importance of making sure that you direct your frustrations and your concerns. It's fine. I'm happy. Well, happy is probably the wrong word. I'm very willing to take people's frustrations and listen to them and take them to heart as we make decisions. But we're doing the best with the resources that we have allocated to us. And so with similar level of vigor and commitment to improvement, those same frustrations should be redirected or similarly directed to people who have impact at state level, and that's to all of our representatives locally and at the state and at the national level.
Did we get to the topics you were hoping to today, CJ, before we meet again?
I actually can't even remember
pages.
all of them. There's so many. It was a 17-page report. It was a 10-page presentation, and Cassie had another 25-page presentation. I would just urge everyone to if you want to have an opinion on it, make sure it's an informed opinion on it. And we have lots of resources and explanations and direct information that you don't have to rely on incorrect information that's circulating on social media. There was a unfortunate example. Well, there's been lots of unfortunate examples, but there was one as recently as yesterday where someone alleged that certain things happened at the board meeting, and it was absolutely incorrect, and people just took it for face value. We have to be diligent in the information that we consume and verify especially before you share and comment to other people about it. There's all of that information is readily available on our website. It's readily available on each of our board meeting agendas, and I know that takes some work to get there and find it, but it's worth the effort, and you're also welcome to ask district personnel. We'd be happy to point you towards those and give you the link if you're unsure of where to find it. It's so important to be well informed.
CJ Anderson, our guest today, Elko County School Superintendent here on Elko Live.